Greetings, welcome to the channel. This is Wanda. Thank you so much for tuning in. Decided to do a video today, and I wanted to talk about how I was married for, I'm going to tell you about my first marriage. I was married for 13 years. And yeah, I got married at age 27. I got married at age 27. And then I got divorced at age 43. So I was married from 27 to 43. And yeah, the and my spouse, the ex-spouse was the same, we were the same age. So when we met in our 20s, of course he was younger, we were young, and he was immature, and he wasn't as stable as I was, but sometimes we mature faster than some of the men, our brothers. So I was like, yeah, I can, it's all right. And he actually had a job at the time, but as the years went by, then we I had my son, um and that's a story in itself. So I had my son, and after my son was actually, the son was 6 months old, then we got married. But anyway, so I have one son, one child, and years went by, and as the years went by, it's like I matured, and he stayed the same. So at at 30, I was maturing, and he still had that 20 something mindset. Okay, 35, I was maturing, and he was still, it's like he was stuck at that 20 something age range in the mind, and even the development of being mature, working, being more responsible. He was still kind of being irresponsible, like a 20 something year old, losing jobs. He couldn't keep a job. He always had issues on the job. Like he didn't like his bosses and people telling him what to do. And when you work for someone else, they're going to tell you what to do. It's just you're working for somebody else. They have rules, regulations, and guidelines that you have to follow when you work a job. And so he just couldn't manage to follow the rules. He couldn't manage to not break a rule. He couldn't manage to stay, just follow the rules basically. So um, he kept getting like fired from jobs. He kept arguing, get into arguments with the supervisor or the manager. They didn't get along, and he's always like they talking to him any kind of way, which I did understand that, because that was a lot of the issues that some of the brothers had with some of these owners of these different companies, talking to them any kind of way, white people talking to them any kind of way. I get it. So it's just harder for a man to deal with that than women. So I've been talked to any kind of way as well on most of the jobs I've had, but I don't take it personal. Um, and I already know the mindset of these people, so I just move accordingly. Like for me, I can ignore people if they would be disrespectful to a point, and then if I had to say something back, or if I had to check them or correct them, I would say it in a professional manner. I wouldn't get irate. I wouldn't get we say niggerish. I wouldn't get niggerish with them. Like that's what we call it when you get like irate and you lose your head and you just do stupid stuff. We say you're acting niggerish, right? That's what we say. So I didn't have to act. I didn't have to get niggerish with people. I would just, in a professional environment, you at a hospital, like I worked at hospitals, attorneys' offices, different places. You can't lose your cool. You can't lose your head. You have to, maintain your professionalism in correcting them. And so I had learned to be that way. I had learned that I can't lose my cool and lose my job. I know I needed my job. I had bills to pay. I had a child to take care of. And so I have responsibilities. So I can't lose my cool, lose my head, and lose my job. So even within the process of the disrespect, I had to learn to be professional with it. I had to learn to pull people aside. I had to learn to write them letters if I had an issue, go through certain chains of command. So it's certain things that you have to do, you know, in the American environment when you work for these different companies. It's a way that you have to handle yourself, basically. And so my ex never learned that. He was still doing the street thuggish, wanting to fight, all that stuff when people disrespect him or cuss him out, knowing you won't have a job after that. So that's what was going on, and he kept losing his jobs and stuff. And so that would put a burden and stress on me because I had to carry the family. So as we married, we had a son. I had to carry the family financially a lot, and I didn't make enough to always do that. At one point, I had a job to where I could cover everything. So if something were to happen with his job, I would be able to cover the family or hold the family down until he got another job. But at one point, I lost that job and I got another job, and I was not making as much as I was making. So I was only able to do 50-50 with him. And like I've always had to do 50-50. I've always had to either do 50-50 or more than 50-50 in that marriage. I had to carry him a lot in the marriage. And when I was making more, I didn't feel it as much. At the time, I didn't feel it as much because I had more money to be able to handle everything. And then, he had room to grow in that he needed to develop his skills. See, the thing is, I was college educated and he was not. And so, not that I worked jobs that uh, paid me for my education, but I acquired skills. That's another thing you acquire when you go to university and you go to higher education. You get higher education, you acquire skills that uh, uh, allow you to uh, be able to handle certain situations and be a little bit more trainable. You think a little bit outside the box of certain situations where you always it's like you become more like a problem solver. That higher education allowed me to be more of a problem solver. So if I um, encounter certain situations at work, I will always think things through. I think college did that one good thing for me, for my mind. It allowed me to think bigger or think broader outside of a smaller uh, mindset, right? So when you're not college educated or higher educated, sometimes your thinking is a little bit more narrow. It's a little bit more limited in that situation. So with my ex, he didn't have like higher education as much as I did. So when he encountered certain situations like at work and stuff, it was so difficult for him to think outside of that situation and think higher and think bigger and think focus more on why remember why you're here. uh, if you have a job, you're here to make money to provide for yourself, take care of your family, etc. So if you have a conflict at work, you're going to always have that in the front of your mind, reminding yourself, remember what you're here for. This little conflict or this little issue that you're having with someone at work or with the job, you work through and you manage to, you know, let some things basically choose your battles. Basically, you're choosing your battles at work because you need your job. So you may tolerate some things. You may tolerate some disrespect. You may tolerate some people being rude to you. You may tolerate that because at the end of the day, you know you need your job. You know you have bills to pay. You know you have a child, mouths to feed, right? So you kind of tolerate some stuff at that job until you find another job, right? You tolerate some things at work or at that job that you may, not like until you find another job because you can't just quit, because you have mouths to feed. But he didn't think like that. Like he didn't think like that. And I think the reason that he didn't think like that is because I was always there to catch him when he fell. I was always there with the job and consistent and, always, I rarely got fired from a job. I think in my lifetime of working, I may have been fired from maybe one, maybe two jobs. Most of the jobs that I've had, I have left. I've quit, got a better job. So it's like I had quit that job for a better job. It's always like a step up the ladder for me in my life. It's always been like that. It was kind of rare that I got fired from a job. But so with him, he always got fired. He got fired constantly. He was constantly unemployed. The benefit of that to the family was the fact that he was home with our son. With well, he was a stepdad to our son, so he wasn't the father of our son, but he was the stepdad to our son. And with that, in that situation, what happened was we dated for like 3 years, two and a half years, and then it's crazy because when we dated for 2 years before we got married, we dated, and I broke up with him for the very reason that I divorced him years later. So it's always good to not ignore the red flags, because I had red flags that I ignored with him. He was a little irresponsible, as well as he had a bad temper, and he would like kind of rage. He didn't have self-control of his anger. And I know we all had anger issues, because I had some anger issues too. It wasn't out of control, but it was still an anger issue that I could control. But he had anger issues sometimes that he couldn't control. And he would drink and smoke. So when you have an anger issue and you drink and smoke, use substances or a drink or whatever, it exacerbates the problem. It exacerbates anger. And so when we were just dating before we got married, we had an argument, and he overreacted, and he was on substances. I think he was smoking or drinking or whatever. And we had an argument, and he went overboard. Like he was throwing my clothes outside. Like he went overboard about an argument. Like he was throwing my clothes on the ground. Like he did some crazy stuff. And so we broke up for that. It was a domestic, like he went over when we would argue, he would go overboard with it, and he would scare me, because his a simple argument would be, it would he would it would just turn into like a massive situation that I felt like he was like totally overreacting. And I saw those red flags, and so I broke up with him at one point. When I broke up with him, I met another guy. We dated. We dated for like 6 months. I got pregnant. So the guy that I was dating was my son's father. Like I was with him for 2.5 years, never got pregnant. Met this man, 6 months, got pregnant. So that's how it's like sometimes it's meant and sometimes it's not meant. And so me and the second guy, we dated for 6 months. We weren't dating long. We were young. Both of us was in our 20s. He was a semi-pro basketball player. He traveled overseas and everything. So when he found I was pregnant, he was like, "Well, I'm gonna still travel overseas. Like I'm not gonna be like settling down." Like he didn't want to settle down. He didn't want to get married. And so I'm trying to figure out what do you want to do as far as being with me, not the fact of what do you want to do about the baby, because I knew I was keeping my baby, but I wanted to know what he wanted to do in the relationship. And so his thing is, you know, I'm still going to travel. I'm not going to be here. So I'm still playing semi pro ball, going to go overseas. I'm still playing. So my choice was, okay, you can live your life. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to keep my baby. So that was my choice. I had a good job at the time. I was 25 at the time. I had a good job, and there was no reason why I couldn't keep my baby. So I was like, okay, well, I'll take care of my baby. You can live your life. I'm gonna take care of my baby. So that's what I decided to do. He started traveling and doing his own thing. We talked, but it was distant, and he never really wanted to accept responsibility for our son. He was asking me, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean what I'm going to do?" He's asking me like, are you going to keep? I'm like, of course. Like, just the fact that he asked me that, it disturbed me, because at the time I was a Christian, and that's not something that I believed in. So I was like, oh, absolutely not. Like, I didn't have a reason not to keep. I'm 20 something years old. I'm grown, and I got a good job. Like, why would you even ask me that? Yes, I'm keeping my son. Yeah, I was kind of not. I was kind of turned off by him when he asked me that, because I'm like, yeah, yeah. That thinking disturbed me, and um, so when he asked me that, it's like that pushed me away from him, because I'm like, You deny my son. Like already, I didn't know it was a boy or girl, but I'm like, you deny my son. And I was always looking at it like my son. This is my child. Like it's in my body. Like it's my son. Like you deny my son. So I was feeling like that about him, and that pushed me away from him. So anyway, he still did his own thing. He was selfish. He traveled, whatever. I was living my life. So at that time, I was pregnant by myself, but I was still working and living my life, and I was happy. I had everything I needed, and the other one that I broke up with came back in the picture. My ex came back in the picture begging and, oh, sorry, blah, 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 change and blah, 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 the sorries, I'm in my 20s and I'm pregnant, I'm emotional. And I told him about the baby and all that and what happened with this relationship. I told him I was dating somebody and blah, blah, blah. He was like, well, I still want you back. I love you. I will be a father to the baby. Da, 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 da. So he did accept me and the baby. He knew who he was, and everybody knew what was going on. He decided he wanted to come back. I accepted him back because I was in an emotional state, pregnant by myself. Come on now, I'm in an emotional state. So I accepted him back, not remembering why I broke up with him in the first place. Got back together. The job thing happened, and so forth and so on. Had the baby. Now, like I said, the advantage of him being in between jobs and not being responsible and working like he should was the fact that he was the babysitter. And so that saved us a lot of money because daycare was very expensive. Nursery was very expensive. And I had to put my son in that because I had to work. And so the fact that he was not working, it benefited our family because it's like the roles got reversed. I was working. At the time, I had a really good job, good paying job, and I had to go back to work after 6 weeks after had the baby, and in 6 weeks, and then I had to go back to work. So, and I was pumping and breastfeeding, so I was like pumping and trying to do all this, but he was at home because he wasn't working, which helped because at one point when he was working and I was working, we had to put the baby in daycare, and we was kind of nervous because we don't know these people. We trying to vet people. You don't know if they're crazy. You don't know how they're gonna treat your baby. So we were kind of nervous about that. And so he was at home. So he because he wouldn't keep a job, he was at home. But so he ended up being like there with the baby, with our son. So he was able. So I felt peace about that because he was so little. The baby, it was an infant. It was the baby. So we don't know if somebody can abuse the baby, and he can't tell us. So it was good those years that he was it in between jobs and stuff, kind of irresponsible, but I kind of overlooked a lot of that because he was there with the baby. Like I would come home, it's like the roles got reversed. I was the worker, he was at home with the baby. I come home, he would cook. He could cook really good. He was like from Mississippi and he was a good cook. He was like a chef. Like he cooked really southern, really good southern food. I'm from New Jersey, so I didn't cook as well. He cooked better than me. So he would have a spread ready. Always my food was always cooked. Baby was always taken care of. Like domestically, he was really good at that. And so it's like I said, the roles got reversed, but at the time it worked for us because I had the really good paying job. I was paying everything, but he was saving us money by being there and protecting the baby because we didn't want to have the baby with strangers. So that worked out for a couple of years. But then as the years went on and our son got older, it was time for him and then I had to get another job because I lost that other job. So I had to find another job and it was less pay. It was half the pay that I was making. So things got tight. I was not able to just pay all these bills by myself. He had a car, I had a car. He had insurance, I had insurance. We had rent, like all this I couldn't pay if he didn't keep a job. He had to keep a job to at least pay his rent, his car note, half the bills, all that. We had to do like 50-50. And so when he still was inconsistent with the jobs, it took a toll on me because I couldn't afford to pay all the bills a week. I started losing cars, got cars repoed. His car got repoed, but we kept mine. We had one, and then we had to share my car and take him here and there. And I really didn't like him to drive my car because I need my car. Like he wasn't paying the bills, I was, so I needed my car. I didn't need him to be running up and down the road, have an accident, then I would be carless and I couldn't get to work. So it just got real financially tight. And then I started seeing as the years went on, my son started getting older. He started playing basketball. That was extra money and fees. He just wasn't responsible. So at 35, he was still irresponsible. When I turned 40, I had to re-examine my life. I was struggling and stressed out because I was always working and have never been without a job. And I just was trying to figure out, why am I feeling stressed out and struggling in my life with my family? And I'm doing the right thing. I'm married. I'm in a family. Why am I struggling here? And I'm always working. Like I never not had a job, but he was always he caused undue stress in my life because I praise the Most High that I never had health problems. But if I kept living like that, it would have caused, because the stress was just too much of trying to figure out how to pay bills, try to rob Peter to pay Paul, trying to losing this car and that car and moving every year because we couldn't afford rent. Like he was causing us a lot of stress in my life and our family because he wouldn't keep a job. And one time I heard him on the phone tell his friend, this changed everything. I think I was 40 at the time, and I overheard him on the phone talking to his friend saying, I ain't got to work. My wife works. I don't have to work. I heard him say that, and it just changed something in me about him. I'm like, I'm up here stressing out. I'm up here, hardly can't get sleep, working long hours to try to pay these bills for us to have a roof over our head. And he's telling somebody on the phone, I don't have to work. My wife got a job. My wife can work. It changed everything about how I felt about him. And after that, it's like my feelings towards him start changing. We were married, but I didn't want him to touch. I didn't have a desire for him to touch me. Like we sleeping in the same bed, and it just, his foot would touch me and I would just be like, oh, it just, and he's a very handsome man, but I would just, it changed everything of how I felt about him when I heard him say that. And I even, when he got off the phone, I asked him, I said, I heard you say that on the phone. I said, so is that why you don't keep a job? Is that why he didn't say nothing because he was surprised that I heard him. And I was like, that's wrong. I said, that's so wrong. Like, it just changed everything, everything. And at 43, that's when I had enough, and I was like, I filed for divorce. I'm like, this is not working because I can't keep living the rest of my life. I've lived all these years with you, and I've been struggling and stressed out for years, and I'm like, you're not going to change. Like he still was the same person I met when he was in his 20s. When we met in our 20s, 25, he was still the same person. Years went by. I matured. I changed. Became, you know, uh, you know, just just uh, evolved. I began to evolve, and he just stayed the same. He didn't change in terms of responsibility, in terms of maturity. He stayed the exact same as when he was 25. At 40, 25 to 40, he didn't change, but I did. I changed, and um, he just never became responsible. He was still like a child. And even when I filed for divorce in my 40s, I think it was 43, when I was moving, because when I filed for divorce where we were living, I was moving from that place. It was a nice townhouse. I loved it too. And but I was moving, and that's when I decided I was gonna move to Colorado. And the landlord said that he had to move because he couldn't afford, he didn't have a job. So when we moved, he had to move back with his family. He had, because he couldn't even afford it. When I was leaving, he couldn't afford the townhouse we were living in because he didn't have a job. So the landlord's like, he can't stay because he don't have a job. He can't pay your rent. And so it was just 43, he had to move back with his family. They came to get him and his stuff. When we divorced, they had to come and get him like a child. At 43, he had to move back with his family. So this is what I have been dealing with for 13 years. It was really 15 years because we dated for like 2 years before that. So yeah, that's what I had to deal with almost all my adult life, struggling with a man like that. So I became single at 43, and that's when I got back into the trying to figure out how you do the dating thing situation because I haven't wasn't in that scene all those years since I was in my early 20s. So I had to try to figure out how this dating thing go. So I made a couple of mistakes. Dated, and that's when I had the first narcissistic relationship in my 40s, like a couple of years, like 6 years after I got divorced, I met a narcissist. So that's when I first experienced with dealing with a narcissist, which is what this channel is sharing my narcissistic survivor experience. And so that is kind of my relationship when I was married and how that went. And so, and now leading up to these narcissistic relationships. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with in my life, in relationships, I haven't gotten discouraged because I know the right person is out there for me somewhere. So only the Father will have to bring him to me and show me that this is the right one, not only based on finances, but just have to, pray about it, watch him, spend time together, etc. So that is my video for today. My experience of being married for 13 years. And yeah, just wanted to share it with you a little bit of more personal information about me and my personal life and personal relationships. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will do another video in the next couple of days. So see you guys in the next video.